Welcome to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Southwest Washington's #1 show for real estate news and information. Without further ado, here are your hosts and a couple of guys who, as busy realtors and successful brokerage owners, know a thing or two about real estate. Steve Nassar of Premier Property Group and Joe Fustolo of Fustolo Properties.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Portland Real Estate Podcast. Today is a great episode. We have Justin Harnish back again with us for the second or third time. This is episode number 145, and what we're talking about today is a lot about our market, the high-end market, what he sees, what's going on. We might focus in a little bit about Lake Oswego and some of the things going in and around the lake. So welcome back, Justin, and I'll have Steve introduce him. My name's Joe Fustolo with Fustolo Properties, and Steve, my buddy and co-host, is going to introduce Justin. Steve Nassar with Premier Property Group. Take it away.
Hey, awesome. Thanks, Joe. Great to have Justin back on. He's one of my favorite guests. He's just a consummate professional in our industry. He operates at the highest level and is always just a great interview. I remember your first interview. Unfortunately, I wasn't on the first. But this is your third time, I believe, Justin. The first time I had a conflict, I wasn't on, but man, you brought some cool stats, and you always put a lot into everything you do, Justin. It's a lot of your success. One thing I was thinking about as I was getting ready for this interview is, I've now done this podcast. I started with Tucker in 2015. So we're coming on, 7-8 years of doing this podcast. And there's a lot of times when this podcast, you have filler info, right? Times are good, market's kind of stable. And so we get on here and we talk about the happenings in real estate. And sometimes it's, the love letter, is it going away? Or is this coming? Or, with Portland Energy score, what does that mean? And during those times, you have an audience and they're grateful for that info. But what I kind of appreciate is you're keeping your audience around for those really big moments. And the last time you were on, Justin, was when COVID hit. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. No, I forgot about that, actually. What was COVID?
It's those moments where our audience just piles in. Like, your numbers of listeners spikes through the roof. It's great to have guys like Justin around and Randy Sebastian and others who are quick to jump in and go, I didn't need to be on a bunch of episodes talking about love letters, but man, there's big stuff happening in the market right now. And this is one of those moments. And so it's awesome to have you here. And this is really what the podcast is about. And those filler times are so that we have this platform when these big things happen. If that makes sense to everyone. So Justin, thank you for being on and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. I will say I'm sitting in the same chair when I was 2 years ago when we first did this, or when we second did it, but it was during COVID. And I remember sitting here thinking, we were all sitting here thinking, where's this going? What are we doing? What's happening? And to think what happened, we all know what happened in the marketplace. But I think what happened that I think is one of the coolest things is the broker to broker respect, the broker to broker communication, the broker to broker sort of support that has happened that came out of COVID. I mean, we need each other. We needed each other then. We need each other now. And I just feel like that generally, I'd say 98% of the people that I'm dealing with are good, solid. There's a lot of new people. We can talk about that. But the brokers are there to get a deal done, to work together, to represent their clients, to represent the industry. And I just feel like COVID really helped that kind of sort of ego check people. You know what I mean?
Well, and something similar is happening on some level now. It's different than COVID. It's always different, right? It's pretty rare that you have the same crisis twice or same changes in the industry twice, but there's similarities, right? There's similar patterns. And Yeah, go back a year ago, summer of 2021. We were all so busy, and life was good, and you know, you don't have a lot of time for that camaraderie, and it's just different, right? But it's like we all become a band of brothers when times are tough, and we're like, hey, is this happening to you? It's kind of weird. I mean, I called you, Justin, a month ago because I've got a $3 million listing. It's 3 now. It was 3.5 before. We've been on the market now for 10 weeks. We had a couple showings the first 2 weeks, and then it was nothing for 6-7 weeks. And I had a call with my seller to talk about, you know, strategy, pricing, everything, you know, just a check-in call. And before I did that call, I called you. I was like, what are you seeing? And it helped me with that call. But that's the cool stuff that really surfaces during times like this, right?
Well, I think we always have to take that call, and we always have to be real on that call, right? It doesn't help for me to sit there and go, oh yeah, man, we're crushing it. We got so many showings. I don't know what to do. You know, because it's completely false, and it wouldn't help you. It wouldn't help the industry. It wouldn't help the community. You know, we're all going through the same thing at the same time. You know, nobody's doing any better than anybody else. You know, what the difference is it's volume now, right? I mean, we're going to see a lesser volume because demand has stepped back, and supply hasn't really changed. You know, demand has stepped back a little bit. So. You know, I mean, we have to recalibrate our expectations for our sellers, for our buyers, and from broker to broker. Yeah, we gotta just communicate more and be honest with each other. It doesn't help to act like the world is so great with me and not with you, not for you, for you.
What are you seeing, Justin? I mean, you are pretty heavily focused on the higher end, even though I think I recently was looking on Zillow or something. You did have something that in below $1 million was, interestingly enough.
We'll sell anything. We got one coming up below $1 million in Lake Oswego. I mean, we've got, you know, I mean, we write offers, you know, below $1 million all the time, and we don't list as many, but it's not like we're not looking for those listings. We certainly would love them because they're the ones that are selling right now.
True story.
You know, I'm seeing what everybody else is seeing. You know, I mean, at the upper end, it's the same thing. People are a little bit kind of sitting back and waiting and see what happens. You know, I don't know that I would sit back and wait if rates are going to go up. Doesn't make sense to sit back and wait and know that the rates are going to rise. I'm hearing now that possibly this fall they might come back down. So to what level, who knows? But at the upper end, you know, you have a little different mentality, maybe a little bit different need. Maybe the need is not to get into a home right away because my kids are going to school. It's more of an investment and a lifestyle play. So I'll sit back, and if I can sit back and wait and watch that market, you know, soften a little bit, I can do that. You know, that family that's looking to buy a house that needs to get in before school is going to have a very different urgency and a very different mentality. So
I was thinking that too, Justin. That's interesting.
Some of those are at the higher end, you know, where someone comes in and says, hey, my lifestyle is this, and I got to get into school, and I'm going to go buy this house. And we've seen a couple of those in the West Hills where we haven't seen a lot of sales. There's been 2 or 3. And if you talk to the broker, it's like, it was a perfect match. It was one and done. You know, it was one of those got really lucky type of buyers, where the rest of us that are holding inventory up there are not seeing a lot of action at all.
I was going to bring that up to you because that's I think an observation I've made is, and I don't think I'd ever thought about this before until recently, is a luxury home. And I don't know where you define luxury, say 2 million, maybe a little higher. Is it ever a must buy situation? Right. And I'm sure there are a few exclusions and situations where it is, but I think to your point, it is kind of just that. It's a luxury purchase, right?
Well, it just depends. You know, there's people that exist in I tell my kids, whenever you walk into the room, there's somebody who has more money than you, there's somebody who has less money than you, and there's somebody, you know, and has a different lifestyle than you and a lesser lifestyle than you. So just be open-minded. It's the same thing in real estate, right? There's people who are used to living, I mean, their lifestyle, because of what they earn, it's different. I mean, $4.5 million is their budget because they can afford it and they're used to it. So once they're used to it, then it's like, okay, I'm not going to go down and buy a $2 million house when I can afford a 5. I'm going to go buy a 5.
Okay. And let's carry that thought through. So, okay, let's say you're in a $4.5 million house today and you're looking around and there's some storm clouds on the horizon. What is the scenario? And let's say that $4.5 million house is in Portland. What's the scenario where you need to jump to something different? That's kind of what I'm talking about. Now, a relocation, I could see, okay, I'm an executive, I'm a big deal, with a high income, relocating. I got a killer job in Portland, Nike, whatever. But do they have to buy that $4.5 million, or are those people going, you know what? I've got the means. I could rent something for a long time that's on the higher end. Maybe I could buy a 2 million, step back for a little while. I mean, again, I'm not saying across the board that's the case, because I'm sure stuff is still moving. There is some stuff selling, but I just think there is a propensity that you see that must buy situation in the lower price points. Does that make sense?
Well,
would you agree with that?
I think you're probably, what you're seeing there is probably fish in the pond, right? There's a heck of a lot more urgency at a lower price point because there's a heck of a lot more demand. There's less urgency at a higher price point because there's less demand. I mean, look at, and I didn't prepare any stats for today, but if you just look at what last year's volume of $3 to $5 million sales compared to this year's volume, just off the cuff, I mean, it's pretty different, right? After that stock market initial 20% wipe off, it's like, okay, those people at the upper end did back down a little bit, and the urgency kind of stepped back because the economy stepped back. So people are, that $2 million buyer was now looking at 1.5. or below, or 2.5, now looking at 1.8, or whatever the rates then impacted. And when you're looking at a higher price point, and then all of a sudden your interest rates, over the course of time double, and your ability to purchase, but yet your taste level is looking at 2.5, but only able to now afford responsibly at the 1.8 level, there's a real disconnect in the marketplace, And I think that the sellers want to believe that the market is still in their favor. Buyers really want to believe that it's now in their favor. And that disconnect, how long that lasts, that I always say it's like Velcro pulling apart. As you're pulling it apart, it's hard to do, but once it's apart, it's a little, it's easy. So there's that point in time, and I think it was about 30 days ago, where I really felt this disconnect. Like, sellers really wanted to believe it was still totally in their favor, and the buyers were going, okay, let's negotiate. But now I think people are getting a little bit more used to the fact that it's time to negotiate.
Yeah.
What's most interesting? Sorry, I'm having camera issues. I think my camera overheated, and you can't see me when I want to jump in. Something you said earlier about COVID, which I thought was fascinating, is during COVID, our company and our brokers had personal bests. They were selling like crazy. And that's an unlikely time that you would expect that to happen. And now, 2 years later, we're sort of out of the woods with COVID. Everyone feels safe. We're meeting, in real life together without masks. But what's interesting is, I think the tipping point was when the rates kicked up 0.75 of a point, seemed to be hitting the brakes. And Justin, in your clientele, you see a lot of cash buyers. You see a lot of people that it's not their full-time home, it's their second or third home. But with this rate hike of 0.75 of a point, do you think that was kind of the turning ground? Because even though it doesn't affect cash buyers don't want to jump in when they think the market might be settling. They don't want to be the guy that bought in 2008 when, they bought at the absolute peak and it just went down from there.
Well, if you think about this, Joe, and I've had this conversation several times, if you're a cash buyer who in the last 18 months has been competing and losing, and even though your cash was not very strong in the last 18 months because rates were so strong, buyers could overpay and outdo cash, right? If you're a cash buyer right now going the rate hike was to halt the economy, right? That's the whole point. So it wasn't just interest rates. It was let's slow the roll, right?
It worked.
So right. So the roll the roll is slowed. It's working. The rates go up again. They probably go up again, and it slows the economy, trying to get below the inflation line. So all of that stuff. You're a cash buyer sitting there going, okay, I just got beat out so many different times. And now my power is about to totally shift as a buyer, right? Now that cash is a heck of a lot more powerful going into the next phase of this market. Now, I would sit back and say, if I could, let me see what happens here. Now, the timing of that is a whole conversation. Where is this going, and how much effect will we have, or how much effect will this have? The thing that I've been saying for the last 6 months, even before rates went up, is I was just saying, hey, rates will change the market. Inventory will affect the market, right? So rates have changed the market, but we are still in a low inventory environment, right? Generally, every price bracket has less inventory than normal. And so we're not seeing the competition. I'm not trying to say that that's still happening, that the overpaying and the going nuts and the 7 offers on one house. There will be that story here and there, but not on every house like we were seeing. But we just sold a house today, and 4 brokers called yesterday and said the other 4 houses that are in this price bracket are all sold. This is the last one of 2. I got to get my buyer in, right? And we put the deal together today, but those 4 people are still out there, and now there's 1 left in that neighborhood. So
what was the price point, Justin?
1.3, 1.4.
Okay.
But so there's still an inventory issue. Full price is a very good offer today, right? There's no question about that. Maybe not at $599, where you still have 6-7 people that are
it's
fighting.
Still a good offer at $599.
Right. I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're all dealing with it. That the absolute paradigm shift of panic and urgency and overpaying to, hey, I'm going to be a little bit smarter. I don't have the power as a buyer. It's on, but it's healthy, right? I mean, we all agree we could not sustain what was happening before. It just didn't make sense. That trajectory was way too steep.
I personally think the stock market has played a bigger role than mortgage rates on the higher end. And maybe they're equal, but when you think about cash buyers, they might show you a bank statement with 4 million or 5 million in it, but there's other statements probably with stock portfolios that are much larger, you would think, in most cases. Most people don't just keep their cash in cash. And as that's shrinking, they're worried. That's a big deal to them. And it's interesting. You said something, I want to run with it, Justin. You said, you were talking about your kids going in a room. There's somebody with more money. There's somebody with less money. We're seeing right now the ultimate most money version of this with Elon Musk, right? He was buying a $50 billion toy, if you want to call it, right? Luxury item, Twitter. He made the offer back in April. And it's interesting, as I follow this, a lot of it is very similar to what we live and breathe in our world, with due diligence and earnest money. Put $1 billion of earnest money down. As soon as he put the deal together, and this is a guy that recently, up until, recently was a 200 billion plus guy, right? Then everything started tanking. His Tesla stocks, everything he owns was going down, and he got nervous. And so in his inspection period, which he had waived his inspection period, if you pay attention to the details. But so he tried to manufacture one and said, well, you lied in your disclosures about the bots and, how many fake accounts there are. And now they're going to court and it's being expedited. And by all accounts, he's not looking good in his side. But my point is to what you said, right? That's his luxury purchase with a lot more zeros on it. But we're seeing similar things happening on $4 million houses, $3 million houses, right?
Yeah. It's going to take longer. There are going to be fewer buyers. There's going to be fewer traffic. Before you had all that traffic and demand because there was the rate buyer and there was the cash buyer. And so the rate buyer was the one stretching to get there, right? Which, hey, I can buy 3.5. Why don't I go to 4.2? I can get there. I can get under 3% or whatever. And so the rate buyer has gone away or has ratcheted down. The cash buyer has said, I'm going to be more patient. I'm going to be more diligent, and see if I can stretch my dollar further. and they're a little bit fewer now. I mean, there was so much money and so much cash. You guys know this, experience it too. I mean, think about last year's volume, the amount of volume, the amount of cash, the amount of transactions that happened in 2021 in our area is staggering. It's staggering. We're all having good years this year, but last year was double, you know? I mean, it's crazy to think, right?
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
And it's crazy to think that where you just go into an average, not an average neighborhood, but you go into a neighborhood in Lake Oswego and you see a $4 million house. I mean, you know, Renaissance sold on Pine Valley. I went to the open. They sold a $4 million house, you know, not on the lake.
When that house, this is a good story. And I love Randy and I'm proud of him and I'm really happy for his success. But I was walking through that very house when it was framed. I called Paul, who I really respect, and I said, Paul, what's the list price? And he goes, we're thinking 2.7, 2.75. Sold it for 4.
Yeah.
Right. And the house didn't change. The market changed while they were building the house, you know? Yeah. And it's just, that's the craziness. And that's a beautiful home. It's a dynamite location, but
you just, those are numbers you're just like, what, when did this happen? Right.
Right. When I heard that, I was like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, wow. So then everybody started, but that's what 2021 was about. Everybody started basing their pricing on that.
Yeah.
So the bar was jumped over. And then that's how fast 2021 was moving. It was, okay, somebody set the bar. I'm going to go over it. And then, all of a sudden things ratchet back. And then we got Tucker's deal. We based that on Pine Valley.
Mm-hmm. And then, I based Toma off Tucker's deal.
Exactly. Right. So we're all doing it. We're all using, and it's, instead of using the market as a whole, we were using individual data points as a market.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think, right?
Well, and you can get away with it until the music stops, right?
Exactly. And the other funny thing is, think about, so as far as, going back to comp a place or doing whatever, you had to go back like a matter of hours, not a matter of weeks or months, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, okay, what sold yesterday?
Yeah. Yeah. You like normally, historically I'd pull 6 months worth of comps. I'd be looking at stuff 6 months ago and I was like, this isn't accurate today.
Isn't relevant anymore.
Yeah. But now that's starting to happen. That's starting to go the opposite way.
Exactly.
Now I'm comping 6 months back and I'm looking at 6 months back and I'm like, I don't think I get that.
That's not relevant
what are
anymore.
The actives showing? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're seeing the exact opposite thing. And that's how quickly it shifted, right?
Yeah.
It's like literally yesterday's data is not relevant. And it's like, okay, well, and it was the same thing on this as it is. I don't want to do that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Beyond 3 months ago was a completely different market. So when we're assessing value, if there's a comp that sold beyond 3 months ago, it's entirely a different market. And this is like the fourth sort of correction I've lived through. And what you see a lot with brokers is they say, gosh, I did the comps on this. I comped it right. It is priced perfectly, no showings, time on the market. They're going to need a reduction. And instead of realizing that it's not priced correctly, they're sort of doubling down. Well, maybe I'm going to get drone photography. Maybe I'm going to have it staged. Maybe I'm going to do this. And they just don't know that. So we get all of our information from history. There has not been enough history behind us in our current market to give us a good representation of where we should be priced now, unless you find something that's a very, very recent closing. So I guess with our market, something sold for a lot of money and it's a week later, you might want to add to that price. When our market was jumping, we flattened a little and now we're correcting a little. What do you think the rest of 2022 is going to do? Do you think we're going to continue a little this stall?
I feel almost like, I don't want to use the word stall, but I think that's a good word. I just feel like it is a stall because people are sitting and kind of watching and waiting, but there are still the need and want buyer out there, right? People are still buying real estate and there's still a desire. There's still, I want to live in Lake Oswego. I want to live in Westland. I want to live on the river, whatever it may be, Dunthorpe. People still want to go there. There's still great neighborhoods and there's still buyers. It's not like another house is never going to sell. So I think this year kind of chills out and just sort of, but because we were moving at the pace that we were, any correction, big or small, is going to feel like a larger correction just because of the amount of volume that we were doing, I mean, and it's just, and the amount of traffic that was coming through and the amount of buyers that were coming through, the amount of offers we were getting. That was fun. That was an experience, right? To look back on and say, oh my gosh,
you couldn't overprice a house for a while. And maybe in the higher end you could, but
so I just said it was fun, but it was also stressful, right? Uh-huh. Because you're like, okay, pricing is really difficult. And then as a buyer's agent, as a listing agent, you're like, okay, I don't want to overprice this thing. And then as a buyer's agent, you're going, I don't want to overbuy this thing, and then you're getting beat out 95 times, out of 96. And then it's like, okay, the whole thing is just was stressful, but fun. And I think we'll look back on it and learn a lot from it. Remember, we used to always say that we would love to have that Bay Area market, right? And then we got it and we're like, all right, this is cool, but wow, how long can this go? I think the rest of this year, I think it's still a strong marketplace. I do. I think, 6% interest rates, Joe, we were used to.
Exactly.
That was great. 6% appreciation year over year, compounding. That was great. So why are we looking at this as a negative? We just went through one of the biggest booms that we may ever see, and new bars were set. A lot of people made a lot of money in equity. That's great, right? We're still going forward. We're not going to turn around and go backwards. We're not in a position where 2008 and 10 is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I don't look at this as a big negative. I look at this as hey, let's get back to normal. Let's start thinking differently. Let's calibrate expectations differently and just move forward in a positive light. It's not, if your house doesn't sell in 30 days, the market's not, don't panic.
Mm-hmm. Quite honestly, it's a relief for the buyers. Right. I've had buyers that, were 0 for 5, 0 for 10, and they were just kind of losing their endurance of hearing bad news again and again and again, especially when you're $150K over ask and you guarantee the appraisal gap if it's going through a loan and you shorten your inspection or waive it. There's nothing more you can do but have the highest price ultimately at the end and to lose. And now
it's such a gut punch when you lose that too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because you just think, we've done everything we can. That's what I would keep saying. We've done everything we can. If someone wants to pay more, let them have it. And they did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have this little conversation. There's a lot of psychology involved and they have to be okay with setting a limit and walking. And I just said, hey, look, let's go with your no regrets offer. You love this house, inventory's low. You have a fairly new construction, very nice home, let's say Lake Oswego, and there's not a lot of new construction. There's not a lot of, beautiful newer homes. And if they don't get this one, who knows when the next one's going to come around. I try and tell them crazy money ends up winning the beauty contest sometimes. And sometimes you don't want to be the crazy money because we're protective of them. If they sell in 5 years, can we get them out of it? Are we coaching them to do something stupid? But now homes take a month or 2 or 3 on the market, depending on, the higher the price range, the longer. And if you get full price, that's an outstanding deal. And we don't have to compete with, in 4 days, they set a deadline. You have a dozen offers and the best one is a couple $100,000 over ask. Now maybe you get one offer and it might take a few weeks to do it. And full price is perfectly normal today.
Yeah. Or coming in $50,000 less and then meeting in the middle and then having a normal inspection period, having a normal appraisal finance or contingency, having just normal terms that are healthy and smart. It's some of those terms that were out there that you had to throw in there just didn't feel right,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, one thing I appreciated in early June, I joked that the market was going 100 miles an hour and it slowed down to 70 miles an hour. It felt like in June when the Fed cranked up the Fed funds rate 75 basis points, it felt like the Fed just pulled the e-brake, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, in a week or two, all price points just got really quiet, not just the high end. You and I had talked about 2 months ago, Justin, and we were talking about how the high end was really quiet. And actually, one of the builders I work with invited me to coffee. He wanted to talk it through. And there was just a lot of whispering about what was going on. Now, one of the interesting realizations I've had since then, this was in mid-June, let's say, there's a return of seasonality. There's just a return.
100%.
Schools getting out. You've got graduations. You've got Father's Day. There's vacations. The July 4th holidays coming up.
The trends are back.
Yeah. So we're remembering June of 2021, and we're comparing year over year data. RMLS said we're down 25% in pendings, which is significant, but that's because there was no seasonality then.
Right.
Heck, Christmas Day was busy, in 2021.
COVID killed seasonality. COVID killed trends.
Yeah.
And there was no trend, and it was just panic. And then, no, you're right. And now it's like, you can feel, you're right. Exactly. It's totally coming back. We talked about that with my team the other day. It's like, okay, this is a normal lull. We have a lull here after school. We have a lull before school. It's like, all right, and then we have this panic, and then we carry through the holidays, and December is a big closing month.
After July 4th, we started to see a little uptick in activity. Yeah. We started to see an uptick in activity. Another analogy I've been using that I like is, and that I've talked to a couple agents about, it's kind of like our market was like having 3 weeks of solid sunshine, right? Like maybe not 90 degrees like today, but 80 degrees sunshine. You have 3 weeks of it. Okay. Well, all of a sudden storm clouds come in and comes the rain. During the sunshine, everybody's golfing, everybody's hiking, everybody's in the yard, everybody's out and about, right? Day one, storm clouds come in, there's some rain. Okay. Everybody goes inside and everybody's sitting and they're watching Netflix and they're like, I'm not going out there. Day two of rain. Same thing. About day 3 or day 4, what happens? You know what? I'm going to put a raincoat on. I'm going to go hit some balls. I'm going to go on a hike. I live in Oregon. I'm used to this, right? There's an element of that will happen. You kind of touched on this, Justin, in the housing market, right? When storm clouds come in, and they've been coming in for a few months now, if you think back to the stock market and other stuff, people kind of start to sit on their hands. They're hitting the pause button. What's going on? I'm going to stay in. But at some point, life is happening, right? And you can only stay in for so long. People are having kids. People are relocating jobs. People are getting divorced. People, everything is happening. And you can only withhold demand for so long. And at some point, they got to come back into the market and just do something. Now, I do think, again, I back to what I said earlier, I don't think the luxury market is quite as impacted by that as perhaps the lower market. I think it's a little slower trickle up into that market, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, the shelf life of a luxury home right now, whatever that price point may be, is going to be longer, just like everybody else. It's going to be, the listing periods, nothing was staying on the market for very long, and now they're going to stay. And so it's just sort of a, let's get used to this and sit back and wait for the right buyer. I went to a couple auctions this summer, and I've never, I would say spring, because that's auction season. Yeah. And I'd never seen more money spent on little items. One of them was a school auction, and it was like crazy amounts of money, blowing out the record that the school had ever gotten before. And the parking place used to go for $2,000, now it goes for $10,000. It's like just crazy spending. And I looked at that and I was like, okay, this is not normal, right? There has been wealth at this school auction for years and years and years and years. This is absolutely absurd. People have too much money right now, or they have a lot of money. And so to temper that and bring that back a bit, to slow that economy a little bit, and to just kind of, to do that and sort of ego check the world or the country, they had to do that. For how long? I don't know. I don't, I hope it's not too long, but that trajectory was, not just real estate. It was people had a lot of money and they were spending it. So they were spending it on real estate. It didn't matter because they had a lot in their pocket. So when things pulled back a little bit, the intention was to do just that. And it worked, right? People still have a lot of money though. If you look at the stock market, what's it at 31,000? I mean, it was at 33, 34,000, 20% off the top. It's a healthy chunk. But at the same time, people still have a lot of money, so they're just going to sit on it a little bit longer, and they're going to just, maybe hold in cash or go into something safe. And, real estate is still a very, very safe play. I mean, look at, we've doubled a lot of real estate in the last couple of years, and those values seem really high, but guess what? In 10 years, they're going to be higher. 5 years, they're going to be higher, so it's still a very good play. God's not making any more dirt. So, you're seeing a lot of infill, you're seeing a lot of change. Builders are spending a lot of money on houses. I still think new construction pulls this market along on a price per square foot basis, especially in our area, because there just isn't enough of it. So I just keep going back to, okay, rates are higher, but inventory's not. It's a little bit different, but it's not monumentally different. And until that happens, we're not going to see a huge, in my opinion, not a huge shift.
Hey, Justin, I want to ask you some specific questions. Like, in the last 60 days, have you put $3+ million deals into escrow? And if so, how many?
I would say 3.
Okay.
Maybe 4. We've got some stuff off market right now I think we've got like 28 million in escrow, and several of it are off market. Because
I have some searches set up, like prospect profiles, just to see like what's happening above 3.5 million. Because I've got a couple listings there, and actually, my seller gets that too, right? We're just watching the entire, and it's actually one of them set up for Southwest Washington, all of the metro area, and I see anything that comes on, goes pending, price drops, and I'm just not seeing a lot of stuff that's going pending. There's been a couple. There was one on Wembley Park that recently was 3 million. It was a Renaissance, a white Renaissance. It went pending. There's been a few things.
We sold the one on Chandler. We have a new construction, which isn't on the market, so there's a couple things out there that are, that won't close till next year or whatever. So we've got a pretty, over $6 million build job in escrow that'll close next year. So there's a couple of those things, couple off market things. That's the other thing that's interesting, right? The off market versus on market. In the last 18 months, it didn't make sense to do anything off market, right? Because you got to test the market. Now, all of a sudden, sellers are a lot more willing to say, hey, if you can bring me something, And so things are happening in the shadow market a little bit more than there was certainly in the last year.
Contingencies are back too. So contingent on selling. Sorry.
Yep.
No, you're right there. Yeah.
No, you're right. And price reductions, I mean, you're seeing that stuff, which again, people are being smarter. They know their house isn't going to sell in an hour to go buy that house, but today they can be a little bit smarter.
Yeah. The off-market sales are really brilliant right now. It wasn't a good play months ago because, there's always that stupid money. Maybe someone comes in way over the top and you do much, much better. But the seller's like, hey, I want to sell, but I want to get my number. The buyer feels fortunate that they're getting the opportunity to see and potentially make an offer on a home without competing and fighting everybody else. I think it's a great way to transfer title. And, I think that's a good focus, especially now.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll see more of it for sure.
We have a book club on my team. So every two months we get together in our office and we pick a book and we go over, half of it or a third of it in that club. We're doing one right now. It's Think Big, Act Small. I forget the author. I think it's Jason something, but
they're not coloring books.
No. And then once in a while we'll do a romance novel with some, I'm just kidding. But one of the lines that we went over, and we just did it last Thursday, we got together and had some happy hour in the office. It said that, Darwin's book, Survival of a Species or whatever, the species that survive are not the smartest or the strongest. It's the ones that are most adaptive, right? And we kind of talked about that in this environment, right? The agents that are going to survive, the teams that are going to survive, are the ones that are paying attention to what's working. They're forgetting what worked 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and what's working today. And we kind of jokingly said, I bet right now somewhere out there in this market, some, 50 agents or 100 agents are taking listings live and they're setting a deadline for Monday to review all offers. And then on Monday, they're going to take that deadline out of the private comments, and little will they know that they scared away 4 buyers who might have come otherwise, but their agent said, well, yeah, they're reviewing all offers on Monday. And they go, oh, well, let's go look at some other houses, right? And that's the kind of adaptation that we were talking about. So, I mean, like what we've been doing is the exact opposite of that. Like we're downplaying other interest in the house, not in a deceptive way, but we're definitely not putting our chests out and saying, yeah, there's a bunch of interest. And some of this, honestly, it feels like 2017, 2018 again. It's not that long ago that those were prudent strategies, was don't scare away the one buyer that might buy it by talking about the second buyer that's looking at it, right?
Yeah. No,
you can be honest to say there's other interest in the house, but don't say, yeah, 4 people are getting ready to write, because that's a quick way to suddenly realize nobody's writing.
You're right. I know. You got to be careful what you say, and you just got and the thinking has to shift very quickly. Hey, he's back.
I'm back. Gosh, it's difficult jumping in on you guys when you can't see that my mouth is opening. We were on video and my video went out. You
didn't have a beard before, did you? Like when we started this, you were clean shaven, weren't you?
I didn't. For a moment, I thought I was just listening to a podcast, but good, interesting stuff. One of my favorite things is when someone says, hey, we're reviewing offers on Tuesday at 8 p.m. on such and such a date, and they forget to remove it in the private remarks.
Yeah.
And that was like from 45 days ago.
Yeah.
Still on the market, couple reductions in there.
Yeah, exactly. But we're still reviewing offers.
Yeah, right.
But what's funny is it feels like what's old is new and what's new is old, right? Like some of the stuff that we've been around for a while and some of the stuff that we were doing in 17, 18 is starting to come into play again. Tucker and I always used to talk about in 15, 16, 17, we were in a good market, right? But you would have ebbs and flows to that good, right? Mm-hmm. It felt like you would have these runs where sellers were doing this. This house sold for this much, so I'm going to go this much. Neighbor saw that and they go for this much. But then there'd be a stopping point, and then it would hit a max, and then things would get a little bit quiet. That's the ebb. And then a little bit later, it'd start happening again. And at one point, Tucker and I, during COVID, one of those podcasts, we go, that's not happening anymore. Like it's just building on each other continuously. And I think there's a little of that now. Now there's a little bit of an ebb and flow, right? And we're definitely feeling that now.
Well, it goes back to the data though. We didn't have data from the current market. And that's how close we are to the past market, right? We had no data. Now that we're 30 or 45 days past, we're starting to compile some data that what people will pay in the new rate environment. Mm-hmm. So now we have something to go off of.
That's great. That's a good point.
Before there was nothing to go off of. So you're like, okay, well, where's this going to go? Who's going to pay what and how much, what are they going to do? I mean, it makes sense that now there's data compiling and you can actually look back on it and make sense of that and use it.
Price reductions. I mean, gosh, we're having conversations about price reductions. We didn't have those for a couple of years, right? Yeah. I mean, it was pretty rare. I remember in 16, 17, I mean, it was like muscle memory. Okay, so this is happening. Here's why reducing, you get the same questions. We've all heard them, right? I guarantee you've heard them 1,000 times. Well, if I'm priced at 3 million and I'm really worth 2.5, why don't they just offer 2.5? How many sellers say that, right? They all think that, but it's always wrong. And you have your script for like, nope, that's not how it works. You're being viewed through a different weight class at this price. When you're at 3 million, they're looking at the other 3 millions and you're not looking good. If we get you down to 2.5, now they're comparing you to the other 2.5s and you can stand out. I mean, so these are conversations that are suddenly coming back to us. It's interesting. One other thing in this environment, I mean, you got to take care of your sellers week after week. You got to keep them happy. I was telling my team last Thursday in our listing meeting, I was like, there's 2 components to getting a paycheck with a listing right now. Is you need a seller that needs to sell, Must sell is your friend, and a vacant house is the best friend there. And you need to keep them happy. You need to keep them happy week after week after week until it sells.
Well, and I tell people all the time that every day they drive home and they drive by that sign and they wonder what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're going to drive by your sign and they're going to wonder, what did you do for me today? What are you doing to sell my house? The sign is a great attractor of attention, but it also is the last thing they see before they walk in the door.
Yeah.
Right? So they're going to wonder, what did they do today for me? So,
yep.
And daily contact is almost impossible, but it's just, staying in front of people.
Proactive
proactive
is the key word there.
People just
whatever
want
you
people
do needs to be
exactly
proactive.
They want to know that you're working for them.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you got to take the wonder out of it, right? If there's no news and 3 days go by, they're like, gosh, the weather's great. There's lots of fun golf tournaments. And, is my person out there like golfing and, water skiing and booze cruising and doing fun stuff? Or are they doing something for me? And a simple text or a call or an email, well placed at the right time, will just say, hey, you know what? They checked in. That means they're still on top of it. And
it's too easy. Necessary. It's too easy to do that, and it's hard. The vacant house, I think, is the hardest one to sell because the person doesn't live there. It's being shown. I think the vacant house is the hardest one to communicate with because they don't know what's going on because they're not there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I always found that one needs the most attention because
I agree. Yeah.
They have no clue who's going in and out of that door, especially if they've moved across the country or down to California or whatever.
Mm-hmm. One positive is the sellers know what's going on in this market. I can't understate how I appreciate that this time around. There's been other ebbs and flows in the market in recent years. If you guys recall, in 18, I think it was 18, we kind of ticked up to 5% and things got a little bit eerily quiet and things were sitting pretty long. But sellers didn't know and things were sitting and you had to explain to them why they were sitting. Every listing appointment I've gone to for the last 60 days, I don't lead with this, but at some point in the process when we're talking about pricing and stuff, and sometimes they bring it up, other times I just go, the market's changed and it's getting a little funky, right? And every time they go, absolutely. Yes, we do. Yes, we know that. Yes, 1000%.
Well, the media drives a lot of that, right? So when the media was hyping the crazy urgent market, that's all you heard about, right? Low supply, high demand, low rates. That's all you heard about. Well, now all of a sudden the media is saying what we are saying because we're seeing it. What's going on with this housing market? Here's an article about trends. Here's an article about rates. Here's why it's going down. So people read that stuff. There's an article every day in every news outlet that's talking about real estate and how real estate has changed. So you can't ignore that. And if you do ignore that, then you're not living in reality.
It helps us though, right? On the listing side, it helps us. Yeah. I think it would be problem. Now it hurts us a little on the buyer side. I get that. But the positive is it takes a little pressure off us individually because they're seeing that it's a trend, a macro trend, not just us, not just their house. So I think that's been a positive.
And I think people are not quite sure what's going to happen. So it's not like, high tide, low tide. We're kind of in this slack water. And, sellers are like, well, hey, the peak was sometime in the past. We don't know if we're going to see that again. And the buyers are kind of like waiting around thinking, let's see what happens. There's a lot of people saying, hey, let's see what happens and see which way the trend's going. And that'll dictate whether I buy or sell in the near future. And then we're getting mixed messages from the news and social media. People are adamant and they're saying, hey, if you think our market is going to crash, you have another thing coming. This is just a little blip, but we're going to keep appreciating. So those of you that are waiting on the sidelines, it's not going to get better for you. And then we have people stating the exact opposite.
Yeah, I know. It's who do you believe? I know. And there's always the doom and gloom, and there's always the really eccentric, thought and all that stuff. But if you just look down the middle, we're not in a bad spot.
Well, the reality is, I personally think the market is it could correct and it could go down 20%. That takes us back to early 21. Right? Everyone's still going to have a ton of equity. There's not going to be massive foreclosures. And even if you buy tomorrow and it does that, if you're there 5 years, back to your point, Justin, you're still going to be okay. Or 10 years from now, you're still going to be okay. If you're buying your personal residence and you plan to be there for a while, shoot.
Do you remember this? And I heard this the other day, and I chuckled because it cracked me up. Do you remember that after 2010 and 12, you'd always hear the banks are going to release a bunch of foreclosures that they've been holding
shadow
on to.
Inventory.
And that's going to tank the market. That never happened, right?
Yeah.
It never happened. There was never this big, huge glut of inventory that the bank was holding on to that was going to crash the market. It never happened. I mean, so you hear stuff all the time that's made up. It's just sort of folklore, and it spreads through different groups, and it scares people who it's intended to scare.
People have a ton of equity. So, I mean, there's a lot of room to lower prices as needed and not have foreclosures, which is very, very different. Right. And so, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch. I agree with you. There is a lot of healthy components to it. And I think as the months go by, and obviously no one has a crystal ball because everything's fluid. Anything can change, right? I mean, something new an asteroid could hurt Earth. That's probably going to hurt the real estate market if that happens. But I mean, but I think every month that goes by, people will come out of the woodwork who have must buy situations, and they'll start kicking tires, and it's going to be a more normal process.
Well, like you said, Americans have amnesia, right? You have things that happen. COVID's a good indicator where you're stuck at home for a little while, and then all of a sudden you come out. The thunderstorm or the storm clouds is another analogy where, all of a sudden you forget about the storm and you don't care. You forget about COVID. And it's like, all right, that's in the past. All of these things, COVID was just the longest lasting that we've seen in a long time. And 2008 and 10, same thing. Real estate was a 4-letter word during that period, right? There was 12 signs on every street, and it was a nightmare. You couldn't get rid of a house if you tried. Look at what just happened. Real estate was the greatest thing in the world. It's going to ebb and flow, like you said. It's going to change here and there, but it is still an unbelievable asset. It's still an unbelievable industry. It is still going to be here, and it's going to be here forever. So I just look at this, some of these, the stock, I don't want to get into it. Some of the technology stuff that you can buy that is in thin air, crypto. Stuff like that. It's like, it's in thin air. You don't know what it is. And real estate is the safest play long-term. Those are the fun things. Let me go throw a little bit of money into that and see what happens. Like gambling on a horse, it's kind of fun. See what happens. But your best bet has been what we've got, what we're selling. It's
going to thin the herd for sure in our industry. And I think that's a great thing. The pros, it's the Warren Buffett saying, when the tide goes out, you see who's skinny dipping, right? I mean, you're going to see the people that didn't have good, solid systems, good, solid marketing, a good foundation. Do you know, for years and years, every week, every one of our listings gets a little report from us. It's a pretty well done email that comes from me. My teammates helped me put it together and send it as me saying, here's the showings, here's the feedback, here's the view counts, here's, everything going on this week, right? Talking about keeping your sellers happy. Do you know, Nicole Ducart was on my team she joined my team in June. It was during COVID, early days of COVID, July of 2020. Somewhere in early 21, she made a comment in one of our meetings. She's like, "Oh, I've never had one of those go out on one of my listings." She's like, "What do those look like?"
Yeah.
For 6 months, I mean, she'd been on my team for quite some time, had a bunch of listings. She'd brought some that I'd put her on. She'd never had a listing last more than a week.
Yeah, there wasn't time. You didn't have time to get it out.
This last week, we sent 20 of those out.
Yeah.
Okay. But we had the system. We knew what they were. We have, and we're returning to our fundamentals of keeping sellers happy. And I think there's going to be a segment of agents in our business that just don't know how to do that. And they're scrambling to do that. And it's not the best time to be figuring stuff out because there's a lot of other challenges at the same time, right? Stop writing down my idea to do it later, Justin.
Yeah, no, I'm writing down. You reminded me to do something. Yeah.
I got to retrain on how to make a flyer. That's our new market.
And the thing is that's well said, Steve, but it's true when you don't understand. I mean, we've been in this business 20 plus years, each of us, and you've seen, like Joe said, 4 different corrections. You've seen 4 different, and which one was more extreme and how you reacted and what you did when it was extreme high, when it was extreme low, and you probably stuck to your fundamentals and adapted, like you said earlier, Steve. So as a business person in the industry, you have figured out a way to calmly underreact to what is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't been through that and you see a big correction, you will overreact. Mm-hmm. And that overreaction is where, like you said, Joe, instead of pushing on price, you go spend your marketing money that is going to go fall on deaf ears, potentially. Mm-hmm. So that's the overreaction where I'm going to go all in. I'm going to dump it into new video staging, blah, blah, blah. And then I lose the listing to somebody who comes in and says, hey, let's take a $500,000 haircut.
Yeah.
And you spent $10,000 of your marketing budget and you're no longer selling what you were selling before. And now you're in trouble because, things have changed. So it's a calm underreaction and watching. And the bottom line is experience.
And I think fiscal responsibility too. I think, and Justin, you and I offline, and we'd never say names, but we've commented on people in our industry that are probably going to be challenged at times like this, where you just kind of know they're living paycheck to paycheck, running to their principal broker, grabbing their check and running it to the bank. To people that are newer in the business, they've never seen hard times, and they've never made money so fast. And they've learned, because one thing I learned a long time ago through my own challenges of similar situations is you can spend money faster than you can make it. I don't care how much it is. Elon Musk is proving that to the world today. You can spend money faster than you make it. And when that's happening, you can kind of patch things together until something like today happens. So that's part of the equation of when the tide goes out, you see who's skinny dipping. You're also going to see those who were living beyond their means, maybe didn't have savings. And when all of a sudden you're worried about paying your mortgage or paying your car payment, you're not taking care of your sellers, right? Not in the right way, not in the right way anyway, or you're not prospecting, or you're not doing your day-to-day activities, and things start to collapse quickly. So I think, experience is hugely key, but also, not going into a time like this, in a bad spot, I think. Or if you're in a bad spot, doing what you can to correct it, but some things can and some things can't be corrected quickly.
Yeah.
What's nice about this podcast is everything we talk about is sort of immortalized, right? People can fact check us on what we were talking about 6 months ago and a year ago and our predictions. And I remember many, many, many months ago, we're telling people to hone your skills, master your craft, understand what you're doing, build systems run businesses, and you really have to be on top of it. The people that are kind of looking at the market now and thinking, wow, I really need to step up my game and all of a sudden be smart and educated and professional, and it's too late. They're going to be going back to whatever job they came from to come to real estate.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in the last time we talked, and that was the technicians that are out there. And I remember Jan Kaplaner used to always say that we're going to be great technicians. And I it's true. Today, people are literally filling in fields on a zip form, not writing an offer. They're filling in fields. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's scary, some of the stuff that comes across, and you're like, okay, where did you copy and paste that one from? They don't know anything. They don't know what the contract says. They just know how to fill in the fields. And that is where things need to change, right? And that's where you need to thin the herd, and people need to be better technicians, because it's not about, that was a speed of the market thing, right? Where you could get by as a broker doing that. But you can't get by as a broker doing that when the market shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly right.
Hey, you made me think of something too. One of the other things we talked about recently on our team Somebody corrected me. I made the comment. We were talking about listings and keeping sellers happy and making sure we're aligned with, good sellers that need to sell as much as humanly possible. And I said, it's more work to work with sellers now. We are going to work and we're going to earn their paycheck. And somebody chimed in, they go, but it's less work for buyers, Steve. And I was like, you're right. So the business has shifted, right?
Mhm.
We're across the board. The work might even out, but we were running around, making 10 offers for every buyer. And then this listing's flying uncontrollably off the shelf. It's going to now even out. There's going to be more work over here, but it's less work over here. So
Yep.
we appreciated that. That was cool.
Yep. That's the balance, right?
Yeah. Well, this has been great.
It looks like we're around an hour and a half. Do you guys have any final wrap-up comments?
We're at an hour, but
but
that's okay. An hour's good. Hour's good.
Yeah.
Justin,
what's going on with the lake? What's going on with the public access, and how's that fight going?
So I was just recently named the president of the Lake Corporation, so I am in the know as far as everything that's going on. So what happened is in 2012, I'll give you a quick synopsis of the whole thing. In 2012, there was that Occupy movement, right? Occupy everything. Mm-hmm. And so there was this big Occupy Lake Oswego movement, and it was on social media and all this stuff. And they were going to occupy the lake from the steps at Millennium Park, right? Because that's the only city-owned piece of property, city park, that touches the lake. So the city adopted very quickly the rule where you could not access the lake from any city property. So it was an ordinance. I can't remember exactly what the ordinance was called, but that's what started everything. So then down the road, a guy named Kramer and a guy named Todd Prager. Prager's a citizen. He was on the planning commission, and Kramer he's a professor of law at Lewis and Clark. So he had an army of lawyers that could work on this for free as education, right? So, or lawyers to be. They sued the city, not the Lake Corporation. They sued the city over this access issue. Later on in life, later on down the road, the Lake Corporation joined the lawsuit in support of the city. So it's not a us versus them. It was really them versus the city. So in 2014, our lawyers, the Lake Corporation's lawyers, uncovered some communication between then Representative Liniger, who was the current judge. Literally, she was presiding over this case. She and Kramer communicated about legislation that would bolster the case of, getting the lake to be public. So she was not a judge at the time. She was a state representative. Kramer was the attorney for the plaintiff, and they communicated about that. They did not disclose that at the initial argument when phase one started. So a few weeks ago, our attorneys uncovered this and went back and said, all right, Judge Liniger and Kramer did not disclose this conversation. It should have been disclosed. That means she should be disqualified as the judge going into phase two. Well, was it yesterday? Today's Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. On Monday, I was on the hearing on Zoom, and the presiding judge said, yes, she is disqualified.
Oh, nice.
So
that's a big judgment. That's a big ruling, huh?
It's a big ruling. So it will go, a new judge will be assigned. And then from there, they'll argue, mistrial versus start over versus whatever.
It's definitely kicked down the road quite a ways.
It's kicked down the road quite a ways. It was a big,
at the very least, if not. Yeah. Interesting. Great timing. I knew there was something coming up in July. I didn't even know it was Monday. Wow.
It was supposed to be phase two. Phase two was supposed to be in July. And that was going to be because Liniger had ruled that waters of the state are to be public. And really based on, and the way she did that was it was precedent setting. It wasn't based on precedent. It was precedent setting. And so literally our attorneys were like, how did she just do that?
So she had an agenda, clearly.
I don't want to say that, but yeah, I mean, it felt like that. So anyway, yeah, I don't want to say that, but
Sure.
it just didn't feel like we got the short end of that stick, and certainly. So now she's out, and we got to wait for a new judge and see what happens.
When they communicated, did they know she would be a judge anymore involved, or no? It was just completely set.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
What the issue was she's a state representative. They went to her. That's perfectly normal. They didn't disclose that they had that relationship and that conversation in 2014. And the timing was that the lawsuit was already going on, right? It was in the middle of the suit not being argued in front of a judge. Further down the road, she is now the judge, and they didn't disclose that conversation. If she had disclosed that conversation, she probably wouldn't have been the judge to begin with.
She would have been recused or something.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's where the
interesting. Yeah. So that's a big win for those on the lake.
Yeah. So it'll be a
cool.
long time. Whatever happens, I'm sure there'll be lots more to talk about down the road.
Because there was a lot of momentum. I the latest stuff I was reading as recently as a couple of weeks ago, it felt like the city of Lake Oswego was kind of getting like, we're tired of fighting this for you guys. Like, right?
Well,
would you agree with that? Like the city of Lake Oswego is kind of done. They're like,
yeah. I'll tell you what, though, their attorneys did a heck of a job with this last piece. They were really impressive, and they fought, and I was very impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Fought alongside with our attorney. But yeah, no, I was really impressed with the city. And, it's hard when you've got a lot of citizens that to deal with. And the lake, there's 3,300 people that have access to the lake through easements. There's 965 homes that have access to the lake directly. And then there's 4,500 people who have swim access at the swim park. So that's 12,000.
Why is it only 4,500? I thought the entire city has access to the swim park.
It's a weird zone. It was Lake Grove. It's called Lake Grove Swim Park. So Lake Grove somehow zoned this thing.
Okay.
It goes all the way up into part of Mountain Park on Botticelli, and then comes down around some of West.
Interesting.
Lake
Okay. I thought it was everybody in Lake Oswego. Okay.
No, I don't know how loose they are. I don't think they say. I don't think when you show up with a student ID, they say, "Show me where you live."
Yeah.
But you have actually access to it. So 4,500 plus 900, it's 975 homes plus 3,300 easement members. That's 12,000 people. That's a third of the city who has access to the lake. So it's an important asset. It's not just about the people who live on the lake.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you and I talked about this offline, there was an original component to the body of water that was natural, but there's a lot that's been added to it. And
it was just, all it was a creek.
Yeah.
All it was a creek that ran down from the Tualatin River to the Willamette River, and it eddied up at Waluga Lake, which was, at Phantom Bluff right there. And Oregon Iron and Steel Company came in and expanded it and made it a lake and platted Lake Oswego. The only area in question, the only area for somebody to get on the lake, which are those steps at Millennium Park, which is what the whole lawsuit is about. Lakewood Bay, which those steps are on, didn't exist until the 50s.
Yeah, that's man-made.
It wasn't even there. That's where the judge, sort of took a leap of faith, where she just said, we're saying it didn't exist, so why could it be navigable for title, which is what the whole argument's about. It didn't exist. So we created it, the Lake Corporation created it, Oregon Iron and Steel created it. How is it now public? Because it wasn't even a thing.
Yeah. You can't get to the part. There's no public access to the part that was originally navigable.
Right.
Other than the man-made part at Lakewood Bay.
And then it's all about at statehood. So at statehood, it wasn't even there. It was a marsh, I mean, it was just, it's just crazy, but it's been very interesting to be a part of it. It's been an education, one that I've really enjoyed, but I'm really impressed with the board at the Lake Corp, Jeff Ward, who is our general manager, and with the city attorneys. They've been incredible.
Cool. Well, that's hot off the press is what they would say in the old days, right? That's hot off the press information. I knew you were going to get on here. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. I was wondering to myself, I said, there's something going on in July, but we also are, only 2/3 through. So I wasn't sure if it happened yet, but it happened on Monday. So this is definitely at pause at the very least, maybe even, who knows where it goes from there.
It'll be a while before things restart. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Justin, we love having you on. Thank you for making time. You're a busy guy. We know that. And this is awesome. Our listeners are going to love this. A lot of are going to watch it. Either they watched it live or they're going to, watch the recording on Masters, and it'll be put out as a podcast probably Monday, sent out to, we have an email blast that goes out to, over 10,000 agents and across the region. And yeah,
Awesome.
So this will add a lot of value to a lot of people. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I always learn something from you guys, and I really appreciate you having me back on.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Good show.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Justin. If you're listening to this and like what you hear, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Washington's #1 show for cutting-edge real estate discussions. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the members of Masters in Real Estate, a private and exclusive Facebook group, and the #1 source for all real estate topics. Thanks for being there, gang. I love you. Finally, I want to thank our faithful listeners. Without an audience, we're just two guys talking to each other. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so the new episodes automatically come to you. Make it great.